What's up, guys? This is Zach Kolar from RPP. Today we're going to be going over some of the top med ball drills that we use with our athletes to train year-round by using different phases and volumes throughout the year. Okay, so why do we use med balls? So first off, it's a staple in our programming when training our guys because it offers a real-world transfer to sport. A lot of those same movements are applicable to both hitting and pitching mechanics. And in turn, it can help them improve the sequencing by taking the bat and the ball out of their hands and actually allowing them to focus on those specific movements. Med balls primarily train rotational power. In order to have good rotational power, an athlete needs to move efficiently in both their hips and their core. Utilizing med balls, we can work on their hips in both their internal and external rotation, their lead leg deceleration or post-up, as well as back leg hinge or a glue load. In their core, we can work on their hip-shoulder separation, which will then in turn lead to improved rotational power. Developing this increase in rotational power includes overall strength, but is also the speed at which these drills are performed that contribute to the amount of power being produced overall. Med balls primarily work strength speed with the idea that each and every throw needs to be performed with full intent from start to finish. And if we look on the force velocity curve and we look on the concentric side of the slope, we're working in that area that bridges max strength and power. Another major benefit to med ball work is the improvements in strength and speed in both the transverse and sagittal plane. This can improve proper sequencing and loading in both hitting and pitching mechanics. And then it also works on building that intent like I had mentioned before. Transverse plane can be thought of as rotation around the spine. This means the primary muscles being activated are the external and internal obliques. The external obliques are responsible for opposite side rotation, while internal obliques are responsible for same side rotation. While the entirety of the core is activated for stabilization, the primary movers in a rotational exercise are the obliques. In our transverse plane exercises, we have three major phases. In each phase, there's a different emphasis. So in phase 1, the emphasis is improving deceleration and the lengthening of the fascial sling. Phase 2, it's a progression towards a sport-specific movement. And in phase 3, we're adding a plyometric, and we're going to work on getting in and out of the back hip as fast as possible. Okay, so in the transverse plane in phase 1, the main emphasis we're looking for is to improve deceleration and to lengthen their fascial sling. By doing this, we use med ball receive and hold. So in pitching, this can help improve hip-shoulder separation. Generally in our mocap, we look for 33 to 60 degrees of hip-shoulder separation at foot plant. And then for hitters, it's going from that loading phase to the stride phase, and this offers more time for them to actually commit to their swing. So this is phase 1, med ball receive and hold. This is going to eccentrically strengthen the fascial sling. The cues that we use for this are to maintain an upright posture, stabilize your lower half, and then we're going to use our core to actually decelerate our upper body within 1 second. In phase 2 of our transverse plane exercises, the major emphasis is a progression towards a sport-specific movement. In doing this, we use a split stance shovel pass. For pitchers, this can help them improve continued rotation into that front hip. And then for hitters, this can help them create an efficient pelvis rotation that can improve proper kinematic sequencing up the chain during their swing. Okay, so this is split stance shovel pass. The cues we use for this are let the hips deliver the ball, put force into that lead leg, and then internally rotate into that front hip and work over our lead leg. Okay, in phase 3 of our transverse plane exercises, the major emphasis we're doing here is we're adding a plyometric, and we're trying to work on getting in and out of the back hip as fast as we can. By doing this, we use step back shovel pass. For pitching, this is going to be improving pelvic glute engagement and timing. And then for hitters, it's that brief transition from the loading phase to the stride phase. Okay, so this is step back shovel pass. 3 cues that we use for this are as we step back, we want to get in and out of our back hip as fast as possible. In that back hip, we want to hinge, and this is known as loading. And then also the hips have to deliver the ball after we get into our back hip. In the sagittal plane, we're targeting the rectus abdominis. The primary movement is flexion while also aiding in preventing excessive extension. It's important to understand that while the rectus abdominis is the prime mover in the sagittal plane, it does get some help from the obliques in order to help maintain stability throughout any movement. So in our sagittal plane exercises, we have 3 major phases again, and within each phase they have a different emphasis. In phase 1, we're working on anterior core stability and stiffness. In phase 2, we're working on the transfer of force up the kinetic chain. And in phase 3, the main emphasis is lead leg blocking. In phase 1 of our sagittal plane exercises, the main emphasis is going to be anterior core stability and stiffness. To do this, we're going to use kneeling overhead catch to slam. In pitchers, this is going from max external rotation into that acceleration phase. And then for hitters, it's maintaining their center of mass, especially on pitches that are low and away. If we're going to look at data, we can look at blast, and we'll look at vertical bat angle. Typically, we look for -20 to -40 degrees. Okay, so this is kneeling overhead catch to slam. You're going to need a partner for this. The cues that we use for this are to brace your anterior core. You want to catch and slam the ball as fast as possible. And from the thrower's aspect, they're trying to throw the ball with enough velocity to create a preload. And by preload, I mean the person catching the ball has to catch it and absorb the force that's being thrown at them and then turn around and slam the ball with that force. Okay, so in phase 2 of our sagittal plane exercises, the main emphasis we're going to work on is the transfer of force up the kinetic chain. To do this, we're going to use med ball slam. So in pitchers, this is kind of putting everything together and getting power from the ground up into their arm as they go to throw the ball. And then in hitters, it's going to be avoiding that lower lumbar extension on their initial move. And this is especially important on pitches away because it can be detrimental to their rotational acceleration. Okay, so the next progression in our sagittal plane exercises is med ball slam. The cues that we use for this one are to create triple extension in our ankles, knees, and hips. What we want to try to avoid is lower lumbar extension, and we do this by keeping our ribs down. Probably the biggest cue that we have for this one is to try to not stop the ball on the way down. We use a sandball to help athletes avoid this problem. Okay, so in phase 3 of our sagittal plane exercises, the emphasis here is going to be lead leg blocking. This now becomes extremely sport specific. So in pitchers, this is working on their front knee extension velocity or their post up. And then in hitters, guys that have a good lead leg block, it's going to allow the pelvis to properly decelerate, which in turn is going to allow energy to transfer up the chain and produce more power. In phase 3 of our sagittal plane exercises, we're using split stance stand-up slam. The cues that we want for this are to avoid lower lumbar extension by bracing our anterior core as we get up overhead. And then we're trying to pull through that front heel and deliver force into the ground, very much so like a post-up. So when it comes to programming med balls in our training, just like any other exercise, depending on where we are in the training year, it's going to dictate how much volume these guys get and what type of exercise we use. So just looking at the early off season, coming off of a season where they just did a lot of rotation, generally we're going to stick to more sagittal plane work, and the volume is going to be a little bit lower. 120 to 150 throws per week is generally what we give guys. As we transition to the middle of the off season, or you can use this for the summer, they're not playing as much, so we'll start to incorporate one rotational drill and one overhead drill. The volume is going to go up a little bit, from 120 to 200 throws per week, and then we're going to start to really work this 3 days a week as they go through their training. So as we start to progress through the off season, working into the late off season, our med ball drills are going to become primarily rotational. We're only going to do them twice a week, and our total volume is going to reduce down to about 90 to 120 throws. This is because generally most guys start to throw more, and hitters are hitting more, and they're already getting enough rotation work from those two things, so we don't need to keep hammering them in their training. When guys get into their actual season, our goal is to reduce the total volume of med ball work that these guys are doing. So we're going to have them go 1 to 2 days a week. And when they do rotational throws, it's going to be on their non-dominant side only. This is because, again, when they're in season, they're constantly rotating on their dominant side. So we're going to try to balance them out by having them work on their non-dominant side only.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. If you're interested in our training material on pitching, hitting, or strength training, you can reach us at rocklandpeakperformance.com or on Twitter and Instagram at RPP_baseball. You can also call our front desk at 201-308-3363 or email us at rpp@rocklandpeakperformance.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel on the way out.